All right, well, tax season is finally over. Well, kind of, sort of, right? We still got extensions coming down the pike, but over these past few months, I've been connecting quite often with Akshay Shrimanker, and we have been working on quite possibly the first ever hackathon for the New York State Society of CPAs. I do want to touch on that for a moment, and as I understand it, you are also going to be part of the Neural's AI Summit on May 28th. But we'll get into that. But for now, Akshay, how you doing?
Doing good, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
So, before we get into the meat and potatoes, I was actually kind of curious because I don't know that we've actually had the conversation. What kind of spurred you to get the hackathon together?
Great question. So I think it kind of came out of our involvement in the Emerging Tech Committee. Well, my own involvement in that committee. And I think the overarching theme that I saw for the first few committee meetings was that we're all here, we're all curious about what AI is, where it's going. And I think there is this sort of internal fear of missing out that
Mhm.
many accountants are sort of experiencing right now and trying to stay ahead of the curve instead of behind it and risk being sort of automated into oblivion. So I think the idea for the hackathon started there at the committee meetings where we were just sort of brainstorming. If you recall, some of these meetings would kind of go into different angles. Practitioners would discuss ways that they are currently using AI in their firms. Some folks were really advanced in the way that they were using it. Others, they were just there to learn and see, what exactly all the fuss is about. I think you've got kind of have like the chat interface, which is the chat GPT, which a lot of practitioners are sort of used to. And then you got this sort of second layer, which is the agentic layer, which I think many accountants aren't fully comfortable with, and they're still trying to get a handle on as to how to deploy agents, where to deploy agents. The idea of the hackathon really is to give accountants a place where they can feel free to experiment, discuss issues with technologists, because as CPAs, many of us may or may not know how to code.
Mhm.
And for those who don't know how to code, we may feel a bit stuck as far as where do we start. So the idea of the hackathon was just to have like this sort of non-judgmental area where we can learn how to experiment with these tools. I think many of us, even for the first time, and then see how where that journey takes us. It may just be that first day, we put together a simple app that helps a workflow in our everyday lives for our firm, or it could be something that is the next great AI tax startup. I don't know. So yeah, I'm really open-minded.
Yeah. And for me, I think where when you decide to head like kind of especially spearhead this endeavor, I think I found a little extra bit of solace, I guess, or comfort because you kind of focus in on a lot of tech startups and the like. And so for me, I imagine there's more interface with these type of things in a multitude of different varieties, right? And yeah, to your point, leading up to that, I do recall, everyone mentioned an AI this is what I do, a little quick hack there. But as I see the faces of some of the other folks, some things were just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But by and large, once they start getting to, hey, like I'm using this tool to do this and it transfers to that, you just see eyes glaze over, right? And I think that's one of the critical things for me is that oftentimes some people just need to see it work. They need to see it in person. And for me, when I hear, oh, but I don't understand technology, I'm like, that's exactly why you should go, right? Like if you don't want to roll up your sleeves and put your hands in it and build it yourself, I think it's still important for you to go and experience what it is. But the interesting thing here is these tools out in the like ecosystem, I feel like a lot of tools fail because they are operating on things that are more theoretical and not rooted in like real world scenarios. And so when you have real accountants doing real work and have real experience in that field, they could be like, that's actually not going to work in the real world, right? Because maybe, and this is where I love to see our community come together and say, look, let's try this thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great point. You want to see use cases that accountants are facing every day. Also, just getting used to the different types of LLMs. I think many folks initially they got used to ChatGPT. Now there's sort of Claude on the block, which is sort of having weekly releases. You and I sort of correspond a lot about just the different products that they seem to be launching all the time. Things are moving so fast. I think for accountants, we are more so the more measured people in the room sometimes,
Mhm.
or the folks that say, let's stop and think about this. So I think for us, AI is a great tool, a great enabler, but it has to be done with controls in place. It has to be done with cybersecurity in the loop, a human in the loop. And here we also talk about licensure, right? So a lot of what we do as CPAs, sometimes we forget, but we're putting our name next to a set of numbers, or we're putting our name on a tax return and signing off. And where AI, there's sort of, I guess, a lack of accountability. And that's what our profession is here for, is really to take accountability for the numbers that we're presenting to the public, right? We are really the barrier between fraud and the public investing into that fraud, in many capacities, when it comes to financial statement audits of public companies, when it comes to even private entities. Like so many companies now, especially the that I do, is that 20, 30 years ago would have likely gone public. Today, they stay private for a lot longer.
Mhm.
And that also means that there isn't always outside external auditors reviewing those finances. So there's a duty of care that I think accountants can play in this rollout of AI. And, many of us are seeing, okay, there are areas where we potentially may be automated, or where some of our work may disappear. But I think there is a huge there's room for us, and there's a need for almost like a referee in the
Mhm.
room. So we could be sort of that referee in the room to help. Not, I don't want to say in a way that we're like impeding or we are like stopping innovation, but there needs to be a way to sort of transparently review things before you just sort of let the computers go and let them have at it. Now, maybe they will come up with cybersecurity measures and privacy measures and other things, but at what I'm seeing today is it's very much the wild, wild west, right? Like everyone's just trying to figure these things out and deploy fast, and it's sort of like, apologize later.
Well, I mean, we've seen countless cases at this point. And I think where, I mean, in our field, that becomes, you're really playing with fire, right? I mean, look, if you don't have shareholders to report to and all that jazz, that's one thing. But, just earlier today, we were talking about look, there's so many more small businesses that are springing up, right? And hopefully, God willing, or, universe willing, they build into medium-sized businesses, and they evolve, they continue to hit these other tiers. And the unfortunate thing here is, even if you were to rely on an AI only thing, you still run the risk of not knowing what questions you're supposed to ask, and you might still end up with blind spots. And that is where I get nervous, because there's still enough room for error where you might realize that, hey, I thought I was saving $5,000, $10,000, and now I'm in a situation where I need to pay multiples of that to not only correct but go back and hope that I don't get tossed in jail. Right? Well, being facetious in this particular case, please, I really hope that you guys are not in that case. But there are consequences, and real money, real world consequences for filing things incorrectly, or maybe cross referencing the wrong information and finding yourself in a situation where, like, maybe I shouldn't have been this entity, right? So there's that. And this, I think, for us, a lot of us in the space, I think a lot of us who think, hey, you got a CPA, you should be able to do the audit, tax, all these other things. But then you realize the tax code alone is an absurdly large wealth of information, right? And so for you to understand every court case document, every section code, it's just not, there's no realm of reality where that happens. And so I think this is a very useful tool. However, still, to your point, has to be used very responsibly, and you need to know where the nonsense is. That's all. That's the soapbox for now, right? So that I'm really excited for this hackathon. I do hope that this does grow into more things, because I do see that you not only are you seeing the next gen folks jumping into the mix because, hey, tech is our thing, and honestly, some of them are just, they already got that notice of, like, hey, if you don't know how to use AI, the chances of your employability being strong is it's significantly weakened, right? So sometimes it's out of survival. But on the other side, what we're also seeing is that firm owners, or people higher up the chain, are saying, hey, I need to understand how this works, right? I need to know how to lead my team or my firm. And even if I'm not building myself, I need to understand how this works, right? And I need to be the shepherd, so to speak, and say, like, okay, now that we know what's possible, now I could leverage my team to say, hey, okay, let's go ahead and and safely, compliantly start implementing these things. And if we can build it in house, great. But if it's out of our scope, now we know what we're looking for, hopefully, and we can go find the people who could, whether it's another SaaS type program or whatever it is. And this is where I think low key, like in a way, I'm kind of trying to get you to get into that arm of business because I think it's very valuable. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, the whole concept of the forward deployed engineer, like the person implementing AI within the enterprise, something which was kind of popularized from Palantir. I don't think they were doing it for AI. They were just trying to get the government to use software in a different way and just sort of modernize their systems. But I think that concept, accountants may be able to play a role, to your point with that. So yeah, I think for the purpose of this hackathon is really just to have accountants in the room,
Mm-hmm.
that we actually have a voice in the direction of this instead of like a participant or an observer. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's like where you don't want to be. You don't want to just be observing your own profession sort of slipping away from you or the degree of control. So I think this is the first of many hackathons that we want to try and do. And maybe in the future, it may not just be hackathons. It could be more vibe coding or focusing in on the specific problem areas because each area deserves its own amount of respect. So you have audit, you have tax, you have advisory, you have more like consultative work that's going on. So yeah, I think this is just like a small taste that we want to give, and we're doing it during New York Tech Week because we want to be part of the New York Tech Week conversation. New York now is only second after the Bay Area and San Francisco. We're a very distant second, like because the Bay Area is such a huge beast. Like when I look at the numbers, but it's incredible how far New York has come in the last 15 or 20 years, as far as just the ecosystem here, the number of companies that now have they call New York home, and also just like more AI native companies calling New York home as well. It's really, I think it's a testament to all the policymakers and everyone that has helped sort of shaped the city, and all the colleges and universities that are also funneling talent into the different areas. So I think for us, being part of that New York Tech Week conversation is huge as far as the state society, because we also have folks who have significant amount of experience with technology. And when I talk to the more experienced members of the state society, you could see that they've seen every era of how technology has progressed, like all the way from like when the Macintosh came out, and then just sort of the different languages, all the way through Windows 95, Windows 2000. They've seen each era, and I think there's a wealth of experience there that will come in handy with with this next revolution that we're currently participating in.
There's a lot of time and effort that has gone into that planning process. And while you're doing that, you're also deciding you have to throw your firm into the mix with the Neural AI Summit. Can you kind of shed some light on that whole endeavor?
Yeah, happy to. So the Neural AI, they are a payroll, HR, and PEO company. They also do employee of record services. But just quick side note, so the founder of Neural AI, one of the founders, there's two founders, Nabin Banscotta. Nabin and I actually attended CUNY Baruch College together, and we actually took. I remember us taking like I think it was called Finance 3000, basically like the Finance 101 class together. So I've known him for many years. It's incredible to see the journey that their company has taken. They also now have a New York City headquarters in the financial district in FIDI. Yeah, so we're excited about the Neural AI Summit. It's going to be an all-day event, and there's going to be many speakers who are sort of sit at the intersection of fintech, HR, and people. And that is an area that is, since the pandemic, I think has grown significantly. I always tell some of our clients and also partners that we work with that, when we first started out as a firm, our entire firm was in Queens, New York. It was like
Mhm.
four of us in Queens, New York. And now we're about 20 people, and we're separated by about four different countries. And then even within the States, we're spread out. And that has really changed the way people live and work today. And the legacy payroll providers, some have adapted amazingly to that, and other, you could see that there are gaps, right? Like areas where those folks can improve, and that's where I think a company like Neural AI, which is more of an AI forward payroll company, is trying to come in and really fill that gap in the market with making payments internationally, making them domestically, and just dealing with a dynamic workforce that is changing all the time. Like everyone wants to get paid, and when they go in their bank account every 2 weeks on a Friday, they want to see that paycheck come in. When you have a global team, entrepreneurs and founders just want like a one-stop shop to do that rather than like having to use like 4 or 5 different systems. And I think that's the main sort of benefit that Neural provides. And they've also entered into multiple partnerships now with different benefit providers, 401k providers, sort of vision, dental, all those types of coverages to sort of also through their PO product give folks access into like the large group health plans and stuff. So for me, it's like a full circle moment. Like I went to college with this individual. Now to see his family prospering with this business and to be part of that day is going to be awesome. So yeah, super excited to be part of it. There are some other great sponsors and speakers involved, both in the fintech world, also some prominent VCs who will be in attendance as well. So yeah, just excited to be part of this inaugural event, and hopefully it's the first of many that we're involved in.
Damn, dude. You got me. So look, now I'm like looking through my calendar. I'm like, I think I have to find my way into this event. I mean, it's amazing, right? Like, this is the one thing I love about the AI. I mean, look, there's always the pros and cons, and now you have people saying that the AI is nonsense. This is where I find it very interesting, right? What I feel like this movement has done is it enabled more seats at the table. How I view a lot of these AI solutions is it is the great equalizer in a lot of ways for small and medium-sized firms to be competitive and be able to execute at high levels, right? And as you have companies like Neural that are providing additional optionalities to companies who may not want to go with your legacy systems, this is great, right? I'm all for it. Right? And for me, there's another interesting theme that I always kind of bump in with you, right? In that in our previous conversations, there was a lot of emphasis on you working on fintech startups and things like that, like. But rather than me speaking on your behest, you want to get into kind of what your firm works on, like what your firm is exactly.
Yeah, sure. So we're like a sort of a New York City based firm, but we sort of work with companies both domestically and internationally. But our specialty is really working with high growth companies that are VC. Some of them are VC backed and some of them are bootstrapping. But I think the common thing that sort of ties them all together, many of them are set up as C corporation. So as a C Corp, they're entitled to certain benefits like qualified small business stock, which is under Section 1202. As they are raising outside capital, they typically need assistance on the financial reporting side and the tax compliance side, along with things like R&D tax credits. So our firm is really a one-stop shop where a high growth startup founder can come or their finance team can come and just get sort of like 360 coverage from all of their bookkeeping and accounting. So every time they go to a board meeting, they know what their burn rate is, they know what their runway is, they know what their cash position is. And often, many of these high growth companies, their month end closes are very accelerated. So some companies we've actually helped with like a sub 5 day close. We also helped a company that got acquired. Once they got acquired, it was a publicly traded company. So their close was literally like 0 day. It was like 0 to 1 days where we are actually helping with their month end closes. So we're a small team. We're 20 people, and we're kind of split down the middle. Like one side of our team focuses on the accounting, and that's led by our accounting manager, Grace, who's a CPA. And then we have our tax manager, Jay, that also leads our
Outside in.
tax function as well. So I think those are the two main divisions that we have. And the way that we've typically worked with founders is initially they'll come to us as a pre-seed startup, and we maybe just helping them with like, hey, their tax return to begin with. So just with compliance, like, okay, let's get your Delaware tax return file, let's get your federal federal and state returns filed, and let's set you up with QuickBooks. But then it could quickly escalate into, okay, well, now we've raising capital, now we have like revenue coming in. What do I think about when it comes to revenue recognition and ASC 606? I just signed this office lease. What do I have to do with 842 with the lease accounting? It can start off, I almost call like startups like small businesses with like corporate problems. So they start off really small, but they have these very complex problems that your traditional freelancer or your traditional small business owner would never have. So that breeds quite a bit of complexity. Most of these companies are also on the accrual basis of accounting, and we kind of work with companies from tech. So whether that's SaaS, AI, Internet of Things companies, deep tech companies, clean tech companies. We also work with biotech and pharma companies and medical device companies as well. But the common thing that I would say that kind of ties them all together is they're typically Delaware C-Corps, and the founder and their board and their investors are looking for a reputable firm that understands their business like inside out, and has like, from the first day that they kind of interact with us, they're like, these guys get it. Like, they don't have to explain their business model too deeply with us, because we kind of have either seen it or understand the template of how these companies work and operate. That's really been like our biggest competitive advantage. Like, we get it from day one. And the major reason we do that is we've also, early on in my career, when I was starting out this practice, I was more of a general practitioner, and I've made like the intentional decision to just say, Delaware C Corps, this is who we work with. And although we do work with a few S Corps and LLCs, for the most part, 90% of our work is the C Corps and LLCs. Those are sort of LLCs that eventually want to turn into C Corps. Like, many of them they're kind of in this hybrid state before they actually turn into the C Corp, where they're just sort of trying to find product market fit, or they're trying to build out their MVP and get to a point where, like, okay, the C Corp structure makes sense now. So yeah, so that's a little bit more about like sort of our firm and our structure. Like, early on when I first started this, like it's been about 12 years now. The way that I kind of got into this business was actually visiting technology incubators, and it just so happened that one of my early clients got accepted into a tech incubator, which was in Brooklyn, part of the NYU system. So one of the first days when I went to visit them in this incubator, so I see them working at a desk, and then I see this whole room of entrepreneurs, and I'm like the penny dropped at that point. I was like, I could probably help every single person here. And so I got to talking with the office manager there, and then he was like, yeah, just come back every month. And at the time, they even actually had a mid-sized firm sponsoring that incubator, who would send their partners, but they just prefer to work with me because I was a little bit more hands-on. So, like, for instance, like one office hours where with a founder, it was like he showed me a tax notice, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is what you got to do with this tax notice. So he had like actionable next steps. Another individual was like, oh, I got this problem with QuickBooks. What do I do? And I was like, here's the fix. So it was that made it really a lot more practical for the founders. And I, to this day, still do office hours. I still do workshops and presentations, and try and stay involved and keep my blade sharp. And it's not even necessarily for business development. Half the time, like, there may be no client relationship that will come away from that, but it keeps my mind sharp to see what are the things that are top of mind. And I think now it's interesting when I go into those office hours, it is the interaction with AI. Like, oh, this was the AI output of the memo. What do I do with this memo? Like, oh, so it's interesting how that's evolved. It's turned from, like, in the beginning, it was like, here's this letter from the IRS, and now it's turning into like, I made this whole workflow with using AI, but this part doesn't seem to be working anymore. So it's, yeah. So hopefully that helps answer or shapes the question here.
It does. And for me, as I go deeper into this space, what I do notice is, we all know that there are levels to this, right? But where I see a bigger divide happening is, for starters, there are going to be some shops that are just not equipped to handle that many C Corp type returns. They're just not. They're not. But then there are a lot of shops that are also there are enough these niche scenarios where if you are not doing this regularly enough, you're probably going to be in a situation where you're just going to have to keep relearning some of these niche things because it's not only again that's it's not only the tax code because a lot of tax code is not clear. So now you're looking at court cases. Now you're looking at like other precedences. Now you're looking at, hey, like how are operators handling the little quirks of the filing process? How are they handling, right? Like all of these things. And for me, the final capstone piece at the end of this is context, right? So yeah, you know the ins and outs of handling a C corp return. You know the ins and outs of handling all these stocks and all this as, and then you're in a situation of like, but what does that all mean in the context of someone who is specifically looking for funding or specifically looking for right like that whole VCPE startup tech life is different. It's different enough where if you don't know how those bits of context color a CFO, a CEO's, or owner or founder's decision making, then you're kind of relegating yourself to be just a tax preparer, right? And what I love about like the conversation that you bring, like even the C Corp committee where you're chairing, it's not just hey, what's new and shiny this week. You're bringing up like, hey, look, just so you guys are aware, these specific things will get you in hot water. This is what the court case is saying. This is how we're handling in this firm. And if you were dealing with someone who, for instance, in the VC space, the nuances here, here, and here, right? And so for me, I think yes, can you get your returns done by just about anyone who's reasonably confident? Yes, absolutely. However, where I see the split again is like, hey, like so we're dealing with this this round of fundraise and whatever, and a lot of tax preparers will just be like, okay, that's cool, just yeah, give them this. We have the financials prepared for you, right? It costs you whatever much, and good luck. As opposed to saying, look, if that is your game plan, I see this day in day out. How about we have a conversation about how to future proof certain things so that you're in a better position when you go for that next round of funding, or if you're going to whatever it is, right? And I think that is where I'm starting to like really buy into the niche market that you kind of find yourself in.
Yeah,
You
I think for me as well, sorry to cut you off. No, I was just going to say that yeah. So one of the other aspects here is, and kind of going back to context, is the other pieces here is I actively also try and attend different events where either founders are speaking or VCs are speaking. I also read the publications, like for instance, the Angel List puts out like a quarterly report about sort of the state of angel investing. National Venture Capital Association puts out a quarterly report with PitchBook, which shows like how venture investing is going, what are the themes, which areas are they going in. So I'm actively, along with my team, staying on top of just the business of technology and high tech companies. So that also helps provide and shapes sort of how we have these conversations with our clients and because we're constantly staying on top of the news. Like one of my favorite podcasts now on YouTube is something called TBPN. I'm not sure if you've seen it. I think it's basically the Tech Bro Podcast Network is sort of the acronym. It was actually just recently acquired by OpenAI, which I won't say anything about that. But essentially, that podcast has been a great way for both founders and people that work in tech to get a daily pulse as to what is happening in real time. And they broadcast out of LA, so they're on Pacific time. So you usually, by the time you get to the afternoon, I'll spend like an hour or so or 30 minutes or so, because they even have like a diet TPPN that comes out in the evening where they just digest their show into a 30-minute segment. So staying on top of just what these companies are up to, where the technology and where the puck is headed is super important. They even interview very prominent people in the tech community. For instance, I believe I saw Josh Reeves, who's the founder and CEO of Gusto, on there just last week, which is a big player in our space. Especially most accountants use Gusto. It's a big payroll company in our space. So I think staying on top of things is like, I think, another sort of secret to my success. I actually love this area and enjoy consuming the content that comes out of it as well, and also just being in the real in real life aspects as well. So 2 weeks ago, I was in San Francisco. A big part of my trip was just to sort of go to the Mecca of Silicon Valley and see with my own two eyes and hear, what is actually going on. So I met some of our clients whilst I was on that trip. I met some of our vendors and partners, and then I also met some folks in the ecosystem that are there. That all that context is what goes into creating the tax return and going into the financials, right? Just understanding what is it that founders and finance team care about. Like, and here's another example, actually. So, for instance, the other day, head of finance I was talking to, he mentioned, yeah, just put that in the EPD department. I was like, what is EPD? So it's like this sort of relatively new finance term. It stands for engineering, product, and design. And when I looked it up to see, like, is this a term that's being used that frequently now? I was like, oh, it's only been common in finance and AI finance circles since 2025 because engineering, product, and design now kind of work in a very combined way to actually put the product out that whether it's an LLM or whether it's a derivative of an LLM that the consumer ends up seeing. So it's just even being in touch with the, I guess, what's the glossary of terms or or the dictionary
The lexicon of
of
what's new and
yeah,
hot.
exactly, the lexicon of the startup universe is something I take pride in as well. Like whenever someone says something on a call, I'll be the stupid. I'll be the person in the room that like asks a stupid question. What does that mean? Like,
Hmm.
can you explain that? And then it kind of adds to my, it's like another infinity ring I add, to my hand.
I think that's been a bit of a superpower, right? Because, for instance, our profession, I still hold, and this is general too. I know that just about everyone has this issue, but it's like the idea of I have to prove that I am aware of everything and I cannot show that I'm ignorant to anything. And it's like, no. I mean, look, there are instances where you really do need to know your stuff and you do need to exude competence in like what it is you're doing. But on the other side of it, I find that folks who are just like, look, I know this is a stupid question, but like, hey, X, Y, and Z. But then I notice that when again, there are things that you're like, hey, I just found this out, dot, 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 and you get into it. I'm like, oh, he did his homework. Like it wasn't just like, hey, what does that mean? Like there's a no, no. Actually, he's gonna go and now deep dive in a thing, and he's gonna understand this thing within the next couple days. And I think that has, again, to your point, gotten you. I would argue, gotten you to a point where you speak the language, you understand the sentiment, you understand the shifts in landscape, and now you're. I feel like you have this good gut feel of like, okay, I think I see where this is heading. So let me at least start probing the things I need to probe to see like am I off here, or is like, or does my client base now need to be aware, and so that we could potentially adjust as needed, right? And that for me is fascinating. Like, dude, when you bring in some insights, I'm like, oh, wait, I don't know where the hell you got that from, but that is amazing.
Yeah, I think it also comes from just working with really sharp founders and finance teams, and my clients keep me honest.
Hmm.
I'll definitely say that, So I'll kind of give you a fact pattern. So let's say I pick up a startup client, and on day one, I'm working directly with the founder, and I'm helping them with their tax compliance, and our team is helping them with their accounting. But if they get successful, it's very likely that they'll bring in a head of finance to the company, and this head of finance may have worked with other CPAs, have experience with other folks that do the similar work that our firm does.
Hmm.
And when they join, we kind of go through, it's almost like now I'm kind of going through a second interview process with this new head of finance where I have to kind of show and prove to them that, hey, we are a firm that, this is everything that we do. This is how we can help. And otherwise, they're just going to be like, well, I had a great experience with such and such. Let me just bring them in and plug and play, because every time a head of finance comes in, they do have sort of their preferred vendors, their preferred tools. And I've now working with these high growth companies, I felt like I'm constantly interviewing. I probably go through at least one or two interviews style sort of conversations per month. In the beginning, it was extremely daunting. Like it's a difficult thing to like almost feel like you're having to prove your worth every time a new person enters the door. But and it's not just a skill that it's only exclusive to me. I know many other CPAs have had this type of issue, like whenever there's a change in management team or something, but it is a bit unique in the tech ecosystem, where like company, you could be working with a founder for 2 years, and they are just reluctant to make a finance hire, and then suddenly you have this, you know, a finance hire that's either coming from a company that just went through an exit or a large publicly traded company. Often we kind of try and reassure them that we are kind of there for them, because often they are kind of expected as the finance department of one to carry this load of this huge company and the growth that the company is having. And that's where I think we've excelled. Like in the beginning, it was tough, but now I feel like we've got to this like nice sweet spot where we complement the finance head of finance that comes in, rather than being like at odds, which is not good for anyone. It's not good for us. It's not good for them, and it just creates barriers for either party to do their work. At the same time, we don't want the head of finance to come in and do work that's kind of beneath them, if that makes sense. Like, do you want to hire this head of finance and pay them 200 grand plus, and then have them doing accounts receivable collections or payments of bills and vendors? That's where I think sometimes founders of high growth companies can be a little bit like overreaching with some of the finance hires they make, and they
Mhm.
kind of expect them to kind of do everything. And that's where like a strong head of finance will push back and be like, hey, like, this is what you hired me for. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the company to the next stage. But how can I do that if I'm doing bank reconciliations at the same time? Right.
And that's, I
So
think I
I
see
think
that
that's a
more
big
often.
factor.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I see that more and more often where like you see folks who just like, I thought working for a startup was going to be a thing. I believe in the mission of the company. However, dude, I'm like 250, 300. They pay me, and they're like, well, because we're paying you that much, you should be able to handle all these things. Like, no, no, that it violates physics, man. Like you're all like, look, you hired me to make high level financial decisions on behalf of the company. However, you're thinking that all of the work that gets to that point is going to take, it's like the proverbial thing, like when your boss says, oh, we should take you an hour, right? No, it takes 16, right? And so at what point am I supposed to make financial decisions on behalf of the company when I'm spending 80 plus hours just trying to get the financials right, right? Depending on size of the company, depending on a lot of things I get, right? But this is where I get nervous when they're just like, oh yeah, we're not going to hire someone who's going to keep the books. I'm just going to hire a CFO. I'm like, bro, you are asking for trouble. You are asking for trouble, right? And for me, that actually brings up another interesting point. What are you, A, are you taking these types of clients on? But B, like, what would, if you do take the clients, how are you handling the startups where it's like, hey, we actually can't hire, we're not in a space where we could hire our own, like, say, CFO type person, but we do recognize that, like, I do need to get these finances in order because whether, again, whether it's capital raise, whether it's VC, whatever it is, like, we understand these books need to be correct. Like, how are you handling those?
Yeah, it's always a tricky challenge, because initially when you work with these companies, they can't afford to hire a head of finance. So when they do finally get the capital in, like whether it's a Series A round or a Series B round of funding, that's really the point where you do need to bring in that head of finance or a controller into the company to start help stabilize things and be sort of that internal lead. It could go a couple of ways. Like if we see that the work is getting overwhelming and we professionally cannot function in that environment, we will respectfully leave the engagement. And there have been instances where that has occurred, where we have just I've had employees where they've just told me like, hey, if I have to continue working on this company, like I would rather not work here. And that's something I learned early on, where like and it also teaches my own firm. So within our internally, we don't want to give our accounting manager who's got 8 years of experience like basic bookkeeping to do, right? We don't want to give our tax manager who's got 10 years of experience like, hey, just prepare this tax return like from soup to nuts, right? You have to kind of delegate tasks depending on the amount of experience someone has and the level that they're operating in, along with all the other responsibilities they have, right? And the capacity they have. So I feel like if you're trying to like manage up or manage down to people in a way that like you're going to ruin that relationship with that your employee, essentially, like whether it's your first head of finance. So for any founder that's hiring a head of finance, what you're really hiring is someone to manage and take care of that finance function. And you almost have to take a step back in many ways and let them do their thing up to a point, right? Like obviously you don't want some, you still have to be accountable that, that they are doing right by the company, but there are times where you kind of have to let them also trip and fall, maybe make a bad hire, now have to, rehire. And I've seen that where founders can get a bit frustrated. Like we had an instance where a founder hired a head of finance. The head of finance brought in a controller. The controller didn't work out, and it's almost like the head of finance now is to blame, for that stumble. And it's not always that simple. It's not that linear. There's so many factors that can go into that. So yeah, to sort of answer your question, it can be complicated handling that. Sometimes folks in other departments also step in. So, for instance, there is this whole idea of RevOps or revenue operations, which is, I think, on the tech side, it's kind of like this new age financial analyst that kind of handles, revenue, handles a lot of the conversations there, along with like operational duties, along with like sometimes even getting involved in like commission tracking and things like that, and sales conversation. So sometimes if that individual is also sort of financially adept, they can sometimes, I guess, moonlight as
Mhm.
a sort of pseudo head of finance or sort of like the finance person on the team. And then we've also had instances where the chief of staff or like the operations manager is sort of also managing a lot of the internal finance teams. It can work up until a point, but if you really want to sort of, once you kind of reach escape velocities, which is where like I think the for many companies, early stage companies, they are kind of looking for $10 million in revenue or $10 million ARR. Once you hit that milestone, you really need someone, internally full time. And for some companies, it's even earlier than that. Like you need someone at
Mhm.
$5 million in revenue, full time. It depends on the type of company, the type of regulation that you're having to deal with. For instance, like pharma companies, and biotech companies, they may not see revenue for many years, but they're just going through so many, stages of clinical trials, regulatory approval. You may need someone internally earlier, or
Mhm.
you may need a fractional CFO, someone to take that sort of place, and
Mhm.
you need someone with subject matter expertise. So that's another area that I strongly recommend. Like when we work with companies on the pharma and biotech side and medtech side, having a fractional CFO or having a head of finance that understands that world
Mhm.
is like probably the difference between success and failure. Like if you don't have that individual, you're gonna struggle. And then if you're too dependent on your outsourced accountants, or you're too dependent on third parties to come in and save the day, you can kind of leave yourself open to it and exposed.
And I mean, for me, I've seen enough fractional CFO spaces where there are still a lot of companies that, again, they'll hire, they won't hire internally per se. They'll say, we'll get a fractional, right? We'll fractional this, that, and a third. And again, we'll expect this fractional CFO to handle all the bookkeeping, all the accounting, all the financial statements. And then the ones that do decide, like, you know what, fine, but I'll do it for a fee. Guess what they're doing? They're hiring bookkeepers. They're hiring all these ancillary services just under their flag, right? A lot of them, not all of them, but most of them. So for me, it's like it's one of those things where why not just talk to the person who would be most adept at least explaining to you what your needs and deficits appear to be based on a conversation. And if you need the capstone portion of like, hey, maybe this fractional CFO will fill the gap until you guys decide to, you're about to get your own, then, so be it. But like that, I think I'm not gonna poo-poo one or the other, but for me, I feel like it's very similar paths towards the same goal. But the key thing here is understand that I know that these things cost money, which is why oftentimes in like economic downturns, like the things that tend to get shot out is like marketing and accounting, right? It's like, oh, you're not revenue generating, and so we need to let you go. Marketing, slightly different story, but right, it's like that for me that has always been the age old, oh crap, the company's not doing well. Wait, well, I guess finance and accounting teams will be on notice, right? Like get ready, right? But on the other side of it, how do you know how well your company is running? And for me, again, consider your buyer. Again, if you go for investment money, I don't know of any sophisticated investor that would just say, yeah, you know what? You got a trustworthy face. I like the name of the company. Here's $10 million, right? Like it just doesn't work that way. So for me, sooner or later, that has been my nagging thing of like anytime someone is thinking about starting this, that, that. Do you have a CPA? Do you have a tax firm? Do you have someone handling this, that, and a third? Right? And like, well, we were thinking about going after VCs. Then, at the very least, VCs probably have their own set of accountants. If they don't, they know someone, right? And this is where it gets interesting because look, if you do not, you might be a founder that only speaks the language of your product. If you don't speak business, if you don't speak accounting, if you don't speak financials, right? Then you better have someone who can speak on that on your behalf because, dude, you're gonna find yourself in a world of hurt when you realize I have a $10 million product, but on paper you're kind of short, or you just careless steps along the way that could have been corrected for relatively cheap might have just cost you 50 million, right? And this is where I get nervous because again, I'm still hopeful. Small businesses and startups and all that I think are going to be on a huge trajectory, but I also understand there is going to be a contraction. Those that hit escape velocity, and I think to my memory, you had a couple of folks that were your class and that did hit that velocity, and it was for a reason. They recognize there's a need to make sure that we take the proper steps, the fundamentals are covered, and part of those fundamentals is understanding: do your numbers make sense? Are you compliant? Do you have these things that are not necessarily in your wheelhouse? Do you have someone in your corner to cover you? And this is why I love talking to you, man. Like this is I like these conversations.
Yeah, I think also the other major issue that we're having in our profession right now, is just the talent shortage. Finding like professionals that have had like a broad enough experience of like some professionals have done it all the way from pen and paper to now having AI doing it, right?
Mhm.
Like I think that also helps. So I've been fortunate to have that sort of like very rudimentary training, where I'm actually writing journal entries on like a, 14 column paper. And now it's like this whole, you can have an agent sort of doing certain steps, which
Mhm.
is pretty incredible, or writing memos or analyzing, your spend and providing, sort of like flux analysis as to why spend went up or down or why the revenue went up or down. Yeah, so it's I think just the shift in technology that we have as well. Heads of finances who are going to be adept at that, they are going to thrive. I'm even hearing that some folks are like signing up to some of these AI tools on their own even before they get hired, and then and well, there's a whole host of issues with that. So you got to be careful with how you use company data. Make sure you're not violating any privacy or cybersecurity laws in your company. But I am starting to see that the finance department is going to be an exciting place in this new world, but there are going to be bumps and bruises along the way because many of the things that we may take for granted may actually end up being automated. And then there's going to have to be some tough conversations and decisions that are going to be made. So I'm like cautiously optimistic as to like where things are heading. I think the biggest things that we have are really the judgment is going to be so key. And now that there are relatively few of us, there is a lot of work that will still need to be done by CPAs and accountants. With tech companies and sort of biotech companies, as I said, as they're sort of shrinking their finance teams, there is sort of this reliance on the back office to see, to sort of be that extra layer of backstop to
Mhm.
make sure that the numbers you're reporting, whether that's on your tax return to financials when you're going to a board meeting or during due diligence, are accurate.
Mhm.
I think for a lot of tech companies as well, the dream is to go IPO, right? The dream is to get acquired by a large company. But for many, the reality could be that you are sort of in this sort of zombie cash flow positive mode for a while. And we've seen that where like it's taken some of our clients like 8 to 10 years to be acquired. It's not, that hockey stick graph, which is sort of stereotype, is that's what every financial model has to be sort of up and towards the right. It's not always going to be that way, right? And for a lot of companies, like having the finance department or the internal finances in order is going to be super important. I think also with the new AI tools, a lot of accountants and finance professionals are facing tool fatigue, where you're honestly just being bombarded with new tools and new ways to solve something or a new Claude code process to like fix or automate an aspect. And some you almost have to just give pause to that and say, okay, how is this actually helping today? Is this going to solve a problem? How much time is this saving? And do I need to implement it right now? Like, is there a cybersecurity risk here? Is there a privacy risk here? Am I going to be exposing PII? Because if you are, no matter how much time you're going to save, you're going to get in trouble. So that those are like the other conversations and the tricky conversations that heads of finance are going to have to deal with, and CPAs, us as trusted professionals of the companies, we have to deal with as well. And yeah, so it's an exciting world. I'm excited to see how everything is going to evolve. And I think our team kind of stands ready. We're kind of nimble enough and agile enough to kind of adapt however this is going to play out. And yeah, so I'm just super excited about how AI is going to improve a lot of the processes, and specifically like a lot of rote processes or processes that aren't even happening today, right? Like areas where companies have exposure and they don't even know it. Like for instance, like use tax is a big one where you may have not paid sales tax on a specific invoice or receipt. Well, who's going to dig through 10,000 invoices and receipts to find that one use tax amount or sales tax amount that wasn't charged for that computer purchase? Well, an AI agent can now do that, right? Like
Mhm.
there are all these, I feel like there's all these cases where AI agents can actually do that extra step of error checking, which is not even happening pre-AI. Those are the other things that I'm really excited about.
Well, I guess one of the reasons why I also like to talk and theory craft things with you is, and it makes sense now, right? Because of all the energy that you're putting into not only doing the work day in day out dealing with startups and all that jazz, but also really deep diving to your point to see like, hey, I'm doing the grunt work of sifting through the sea of tools and applications to sift through which ones work, which ones don't, which one is nice in theory, which one are good in real world application. I feel like you have a good sense of a good instinct in terms of, okay, this is of the real deal Van Holyfield, like this is gonna make it, as opposed to I'm like, okay, this one needs a couple more iterations and at the drawing board because it's not quite there. Like I think that's one of the reasons why I like throwing things over by you to see like, hey, is this like another nonsense tool, or is this really like, okay, this is gonna be like big in the next 3 years. So I do appreciate
Yeah,
the conversation.
I think it's got to thank high school science class for that, because I guess it kind of teaches you that whole, you have this theory, you have this experiment you set up, you have your observation, and you have your findings. So I kind of just follow that same kind of concept with this. Like I don't know if there's any other way, and I'm sure a lot of other companies have found ways to do some version of that, sort of, test and iterate and repeat. But that's kind of stood us like fairly well, and it also helps the companies and the partners we work with on having a feedback loop and kind of giving us feedback. Hey, this is working, this isn't, today, and how can we make it better?
Well, I appreciate the amount. It's still quite a gargantuan effort, right? Because it's a grueling task to keep doing that. And so, I know you don't need the praise of things, but I do thank you for the amount of work that you put in. For now, I'm sure we're gonna have to touch base on other topics in the future. But for in the meantime, where can folks reach out to you or find you?
Yeah, so you can find, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn. So I think it's like after you do the linkedin.com/in, it's /Shay CPA. Right on our website, shaycpa.com. So I think those are probably the two best places. Just find me.
I'll leave links in the description below. In the meantime, if assuming that this video goes out in time, check out the hackathon that we're putting on at the New York State Society of CPAs. That's the right way to do it. And at this point, it's what, 9 days from the point of this recording. But check out the Neural AI event that's coming up in New York City as well. Akshay, sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Alex.
Well, if you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.